Argentina has been in the middle income trap for almost a century. The so-called middle income trap, like the disadvantages of latecomers, is the result of the rapid development achieved by imitating the technological experience of the earlycomers. But at the same time, the lack of matching progress in the political system, which has led to the swan dancing in the mud. Javier Milei appears to have proposed liberal economic policies that exceed those of his predecessors, but he, like his predecessors, is unwilling to use the power in his hands to forge a system of long-lasting stability in order to safeguard the policies he has pursued. Like almost all countries independent from former Spanish colonies, Argentina prefers to believe in great men rather than ordinary political systems. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to discussing the curse of the latecomer with you in Ideas and Reality by our No Will. The middle income trap is an economic description of a country that has reached a certain level of affluence, the middle income range, and then falls into stagnation or worse, regression. The World Bank defines the middle income range as countries with gross national product per capita that has remained between $1,000 to $12,000 at constant prices. Typical representatives of the trap are Turkey, Malaysia, Argentina, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, the Philippines, and Thailand. Countries caught in the middle income trap typically have most or all of the following characteristics. Economically, weak economic growth, severe polarization between rich and poor, over-urbanization, shortage of public services, employment difficulties, particularly a fragile financial system. Politically, crisis of democracy, clusters of corruption, class solidification. Among them is the crisis of the democratic system, which may manifest itself in two ways: the undermining of the democratic system and a return to strongman politics. Over-democratization, the lack of systematic and reliable republican institution building, and the destruction of the separation of powers. Populism is on the rise, and the tyranny of the majority violates the rights of the minority. Worse still, all of the above can exist in one country, such as Argentina after Peron. Yang Xiaokai, born as Yang Shiguang, was regarded as the most qualified Chinese economist to win the Nobel Prize. On January 12, 1968, he published Whither China under the name of unwilling, advocating the establishment of a Chinese People's Commune based on the principles of the Paris Commune. The unwilling, the full name Hunan Provincial Proletarian Revolutionary Great Alliance Committee, was a loose alliance of the Zhangjiang Wind and Thunder Rebellion and people of the same position. As a representative of the ideology of the ultra-left Red Guards, the article put forward the slogan, "Overthrow the rule of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie." The article also criticized the government officials of the time, Hua Guofeng and Zhou Enlai, as representatives of conservative interests, and suggested that the army should also stage a revolution. Yang Xiaokai was successively criticized as a counter-revolutionary by Kang Sheng, Mao Zedong, Chen Boda, and Jiang Qing, the central leaders at the time. As a high school student then, Yang Xiaokai was first detained at the Changsha Public Security Bureau's Suojiatang Detention Center, and in October 1969, he was formally arrested. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for counter-revolutionary crimes in flagrante delito, and served his sentence at the Jiangxin Ray Education through Labor Farm in Yuyang, Hunan Province. His father was imprisoned in a Mao Zedong thought study class. His mother hanged herself from a beam after being repeatedly criticized. After his release from prison in 1980, Yu Guangyuan recommended Yang Xiaokai for admission to the Institute of Economics of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, on the recommendation of Li Rui and his daughter Li Nanyang. In 1983, Yang went to the United States to study at Princeton University. In 1988, he moved to Australia. In 1993, he was elected a member of the Australian Academy of Social Sciences. In 1998, he became a visiting professor at Harvard University. In January 2000, he became the chair professor of economics at Monash University. Yang's outstanding achievements in economics lie in his advocacy of inframarginal analysis and the emerging classical economics based on it. In 2002, Nobel Prize-winning economist James Medill Buchanan, Jr. commented on Yang's achievements in economics, saying, "In my view, the most important and exciting research in economics in the world is done at Monash, and it is done by Xiaokai Yang." Yang Xiaokai proposed and elaborated on backward disadvantage in 2004, an idea derived from the curse to the latecomer proposed by political economist Watson.
The lagging countries have much to imitate the developed countries because of their late development. There are two forms of imitation. One is imitation of institutions, and the other is imitation of technology and industrialization patterns. Since they were latecomers, they could achieve rapid development through technological imitation without institutional infrastructure. Why do we say curse to the latecomer? What it means is that backward countries have a lot of room for imitation, and they can, without the guarantee of a good political system, realize what developed countries can only achieve under the guarantee of a complete and reliable political system by imitating the technology and management model of developed countries. In particular, it is easier for backward countries to imitate technology and more difficult to imitate institutions. Since reforming the system would offend some vested interests, backward countries would tend to imitate technology. In this way, although backward countries may achieve good development in the short term, they will leave many hidden dangers for long-term growth and may even lead to the failure of long-term development.
Essentially, the middle-income trap is a systemic trap. Any individual, organization, or country tends to choose the low-cost path of development that is convenient and fast. That is why the vast majority of late developing countries have achieved rapid development through the strategy of technology and management models by opting for economic imitation under the centralized power of strongmen. This paper is not a political system research paper, so we don't discuss the differences between democratic and republican systems in detail here. When the opportunity arises, we will devote a special issue to it. In the book Ideas and Actions by Arnaud Will, there is a detailed textual discussion of democracy and republic. Today, I will still quote directly from the original words of Yang Xiaokai.
The first example is before the 20th century, in the 18th and 19th centuries, when Britain was a developed country while France was a developing country. And the most fundamental difference between the two countries was the difference in political systems. Before the French Revolution, an authoritarian system was practiced in France, whereas in Britain, a constitutional system has been practiced since 1688. The so-called republican system meant that those who took part in the election were mainly the upper class, and only a small number of people who had the money to pay taxes had the right to vote. So you could hardly say that it was democratic, but it's a republic with a system of checks and balances. The republic is actually distrustful of democracy for fear that it will become an oppression of the minority by the majority. So the republic has a system to protect the minority. Secondly, North America is a Protestant country, and South America is a Catholic country, and cultural differences have led to differences in economic development. A Harvard economist recently came to a similar conclusion through a regression analysis. It is that Catholic culture and its statutory law have a negative impact on economic development. On the other hand, Christian culture and its common law counterpart on economic development is positive. North reached a similar conclusion. Third, North America has a federal system, while South America has a centralized system. That brings us to good capitalism and bad capitalism. Bad capitalism is characterized by collusion between business and a government, and political monopoly, and another most obvious feature is the unfair distribution of income.
As early as 1920, Argentina was one of the wealthiest countries in the world. What led to Argentina's complete sinking into the middle-income trap began with Juan Domingo Perón, a military man. He came to power in a coup d'etat in May 1943 and served 3 terms as president of Argentina. After coming to power in the coup, in order to gain unchecked power, Perón undermined the separation of powers in Argentina, especially the independence of the Argentine judiciary. The Argentine Supreme Court at the time was almost a model student of the U.S. Federal Supreme Court. Kamer Derinacemoglu is an American economist born in Istanbul, Turkey, and currently a professor of applied economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 2005, the American Economic Association awarded him the John Bates Clark Medal, known as the Little Nobel Prize. James Allen Robinson is a British economist and political scientist. He is currently a professor at the University of Chicago. The Reverend Dr. Richard Dell, Pearson Professor of Global Conflict Studies, and University Professor at the Harris School of Public Policy, University of Chicago. In 2012, Acemoglu and Robinson published the co-authored book, When Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty. The book is an insightful account of Argentina's descent into the current crisis.
Shortly after Perón's victory, his supporters in the Chamber of Deputies proposed the impeachment of 4 of the 5 members of the court. The charges leveled against the court were several. One involved unconstitutionally accepting the legality of 2 military regimes in 1930 and 1943, rather ironic, since Perón had played a key role in the latter coup. The other focused on legislation that the court had struck down, just as its U.S. counterpart had done. In particular, just prior to Perón's election as president, the court had issued a decision ruling that Perón's new National Labor Relations Board was unconstitutional. Just as Roosevelt heavily criticized the Supreme Court in his 1936 re-election campaign, Perón did the same in his 1946 campaign. 9 months after initiating the impeachment process, the Chamber of Deputies impeached 3 of the judges, the 4th having already resigned. The Senate approved the motion. Perón then appointed 4 new justices. The undermining of the court clearly had the effect of freeing Perón from political constraints. He could now exercise unchecked power, in much the same way the military regimes in Argentina did before and after his presidency. His newly appointed judges, for example, ruled as constitutional the conviction of Ricardo Balbin, the leader of the main opposition party to Perón, the Radical Party, for disrespecting Perón. Perón could effectively rule as a dictator, since Perón successfully passed.
That is the root cause of Argentina's predicament. Milei is an economist by training. He earned a degree in economics from the private University of Belgrano and 2 master's degrees from the University of Torquato di Tella. Subsequently, Milei has worked as a professor of economics and as a consultant economist for several private and governmental organizations. Since 2012, Milei has been heading the Economic Research Department of Fundación Acordar, a national think tank. Since 2010, Milei has appeared regularly on Argentine television programs. He promotes his beliefs and ideas and fights against different people. Due to his frequent foul language and insults to his opponents, he earned the title Argentine Trump. Ted Cruz, a U.S. Republican senator, jokingly proposed inviting him to the 2024 Republican presidential debates. On October 16, 2018, young people in Argentina who supported Milei formed the Libertarian Party through social networks. On February 23 of the following year, during a party event organized by the Libertarian Party in the federal capital, Milei joined the party and was simultaneously appointed honorary president. In July 2021, the party formed the La Libertad Avanza. In the Argentine legislative elections of the same year, it came third with 17% of the vote and entered Congress. On November 19, 2023, Milei was elected president of Argentina in the presidential runoff election, defeating Sergio Tomás Massa by 11 percentage points. An important reason for his victories was the Argentine people's hatred of Peronism. Yet, paradoxically, the Peronists saw him as a possible ally. Indeed, Milei was accused of receiving financial support, as well as technical and logistical support from the Peronists. He was also accused of selling the candidacy of La Libertad Avanza. Of course, Milei denies these allegations. Milei believed in the Austrian school of economics. The Austrian school emphasizes the spontaneous forces of the market and opposes government intervention in the market. Note, however, that many Austrian school economists, focusing only on the idealized market state of Austrian school economics, ignore the emphasis on the role of people in Austrian school economics, including entrepreneurship, and especially the self-generated and spontaneous order formed by the self-interested man's game. No matter what kind of doctrine, it is a highly abstract model of reality, and when it comes to specific applications, it is necessary to analyze specific problems. Jian Weiying, China's Austrian school economist, emphasized at the opening ceremony of Peking University in 2022 that entrepreneurs should never listen to what economists say, because economics is an after-the-fact doctrine that explains why, but cannot tell you how to do it.
Contrary to the narrative crafted by the Milei campaign, Argentina hasn't suffered under the yoke of communism and protectionism for the past 70 years. In fact, free market principles have been tried and retried in Argentina by actors as diverse as Argentina's countless military dictatorships to Macri, to the Peronist administration of President Carlos Menem, who ruled from 1989 to 1999. Under Menem, Argentina privatized a host of state industries, cut regulations, liberalized international trade, slashed inflation, and pegged the peso to the dollar.
Argentina's problem is not a free market problem at all, but rather how to get rid of strongman politics and refuse to become a testing ground for various doctrines. Argentina cannot afford to have Milei and Perón riding at opposite ends of the seesaw, oscillating back and forth between left and right. Milei's radical reform policies have already met resistance. Not only did Milei axe several government departments, but he also signed a decree of necessity and urgency with 366 articles. The decree begins by declaring that the country's a public emergency in economic, financial, fiscal, social security, defense, tariff, energy, health, administrative, and social matters is hereby declared until December 31, 2025. Argentina's two main unions, the General Confederation of Labor and the Argentine Workers' Central Union, have organized anti-Milei demonstrations, and by mid-December 2023, a state of economic emergency had already been declared in 11 Argentine provinces. Faced with a national crisis, instead of seeking political compromise and developing a credible roadmap, Milei played the populist card. In January 2024, Milei announced his intention to restore Argentine sovereignty over the Falkland Islands. The truth is that the Falklands never belonged to Argentina. Argentina's independence was not officially recognized by Spain, and Argentina has been acquiring more, formerly Spanish, land by force since independence. It has included the plundering of South America, particularly the genocide of the native people in Patagonia. The Falkland Islands were first discovered and named by French explorer Louis-Antoine de Bougainville in 1764. The earliest visitors to the islands were the Patagonians. The French built settlements in 1765, and in 1766, France gave sovereignty over the islands to the Spanish, who gave it to the British in 1771. From 1810 to 1825, the United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata fought a war for independence from Spain and then proceeded to launch a large-scale armed occupation in South America. It was not until 1861 that Argentina became an independent nation. In 1960, shortly after the adoption of a United Nations resolution on decolonization, the then president of Argentina, Juan Perón, formally raised the dispute over the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. In April 1982, Argentine forces invaded and briefly occupied the Falkland Islands and other British territories in the South Atlantic. The British Expeditionary Force reoccupied the territories in June. On January 17, 2024, Milei gave a speech at the World Economic Forum 2024 in Davos, Switzerland, denouncing the socialist ideology resulting from Western collectivism and singing the praises of libertarianism. Its most central idea was to quote Argentine libertarians, defining libertarianism as based on the principle of non-aggression, respect for life, liberty, and property rights, and reaffirming the importance of free markets. His statement resonated with libertarians around the world, but with a political figure, not only should you listen to what he says, but also what he does.
Market fundamentalists outside of Argentina would do well not to read too much into Milei's victory. Outside the Latin American right, the prevailing trend in political economy is one that favors increased protectionism and national development, including among conservatives. Moreover, in Latin America, recent right and left-wing triumphs are more representative of a bias that favors outsider allure and anti-incumbent hostility, rather than a particular political orientation. Just as change in Colombia entailed the election of a former M19 guerrilla in 2022, so, too, in Ecuador, voters deemed a progressive banana oligarch to be the change candidate.
In the case of Milei, Austrian school economics gave the perfect goal, but not the specific path to its realization. It is up to politicians with an entrepreneurial spirit to build bridges between doctrine and reality. Otherwise, it would be like arguing whether the UK could switch from right-hand drive to left-hand drive. Theoretically, yes, but practically a disaster. A beautiful utopia without a feasible roadmap would have to swim through a sea of blood. And populism is the horn in the sea of blood. I expect Milei to understand the heart of the autopoietic and spontaneous order that Hayek argued for. It is far more significant to establish a republican institution than to radicalize a perfect economic policy. Using Perón's means to achieve a free market without reforming the political system, to provide legal safeguards for a market economy. All economic reforms will be fish for the moon in the well. You can succeed in the moment, but fail in perpetuity. In any case, as an economist of the Austrian school, I wish Milei success in his economic reforms, but I am more concerned about the building of the Argentine political system. Milei may be able to achieve economic success, but so far, I have not heard of any of his initiatives to build the political system. The greatest perversion of Peronism is the destruction of Argentina's republican institutions. Please follow me, share me, and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to working with you on the truth behind the phenomenon, and ideas and reality by our no will. We don't know the future, but ideas determine the future we see.